Lesson 8.1, Solving Equations by Factoring. We're now going to look at examples 4 through 6. There's not much room on this page 312, so you might want to pause the video and go get a sheet of notebook paper. Example number 4. We have x squared plus 15x equals negative 54. We're going to solve this equation by factoring. In order to factor, you first need to move all your terms to the same side. So we'll add the 54. By adding 54, it cancels out the right-hand side and makes it 0, and just is plus 54 to the trinomial on the right. Or excuse me, plus 54 on the trinomial on the left. Now let's factor. A times C is 54, so we're going to be looking for the factors of 54 that add to give you 15. You can use your factoring sheet or just list the factors of 54 until you find what works. 1 times 54 would not work. 2 times 27 will not work. 3 times 18, it will not work because remember we're trying to add to get 15. Six times 9, when you add 6 plus 9, that gives you 15. So we found the pair that works for us. So rewrite your trinomial using those two terms to separate the middle term. You have x squared plus 6x plus 9x plus 54 equals 0. We rewrote our trinomial, replacing the 15x with the two numbers we selected. Now let's factor by grouping. In the first group, we have an x in common. Our leftovers will be x plus 6. When factoring out an x times x gets us back to x squared, and x times 6 gets us back to 6x. Now let's look at the second group, 9x and 54. If you need to do the prime factorization, divide by prime numbers until you can no longer divide by prime in order to find the GCF. So our GCF will be 3 times 3, which is 9. Notice our leftovers match what we already found, so that can always be something that helps you know when to stop with your prime factorization. So write your factors as two sets of parentheses. Write your factors as two sets of parentheses. Your parentheses that match make one set of parentheses, and the other GCF part come together and make one set of parentheses. All of that is set equal to 0 from the original step. Bring it down. Use the zero product property to set each factor equal to 0. Now solve. You will subtract 6, and 0 take away 6 is negative 6, and subtract 9, so 0 take away 9 is negative 9. So our solutions in least to greatest order are negative 9 and negative 6. Let's look at number 5. We have x squared minus 13x equals negative 12. Once again, move all your terms to the same side. Once again, move all your terms to the same side. You'll do that by adding 12 to both sides. So our trinomial will be x squared minus 13x plus 12 is equal to 0. Do your a times your c to find factors of 12 that give you a negative 13. If you need to list the factors to find them, feel free to do that. If you're trying to get a negative 13, but multiplying to get a positive, you know you have to have a negative times a negative. I can quickly identify 1 and 12 as my factors, but feel free to write them out if you need. So I get x squared minus 1x minus 12x plus 12 is set equal to 0. Rewriting the middle term with the two numbers you selected for your product sum, and then factor by grouping. The first group has an x in common. The second group has a negative in common. Because that first term is negative, you have to factor out a negative. They also have a 12. Always keep in mind your leftovers should match. So our first group has the leftovers of x minus 1. The second group, because of factoring out a negative 12, it has an x, and a negative times negative would make it positive, and we need a 1. So there we notice our leftovers do match. The matching parentheses is one of your parentheses in factored form, and the GCFs form the second parentheses in factored form. So set each factor equal to 0 using the zero product property in order to solve. When you add 1, you get a solution that x equals 1. And when you add 12, you get a solution that x equals 12. So in least to greatest order, 1, 12 are our solutions. Let's look at number 6. We have x squared minus x equals 56. Once again, we need to move all of our terms to the same side in order to factor. You'll have to subtract 56 in order to move it to the other side. So I'll have x squared minus x minus 56 equals 0. Do your a times your c to find your product number. So 1 times negative 56 is negative 56. We're going to find the sum of negative 1. We know here that one factor needs to be positive and one factor needs to be negative. Using our factors of 56, thinking about one factor being negative and one factor being positive, 7 and 8 will work. Since our sum needs to be negative, we'll make our larger number negative. 7 times negative 8, multiply to give you negative 56, and 7 plus negative 8, add to give you negative 1. Rewrite the middle term using the two numbers you selected. It does not matter the order that you write those terms in. So if you want to keep from needing to factor out a negative, feel free to switch the 7x and negative 8x to keep from needing to factor out a negative. Let's factor by grouping. Our first group has an x in common, and our leftovers are x plus 7. Our second group, we know we need to factor out a negative. If you need to, do the prime factorization to find what 8 and 56 have in common. Another thing you could think about is because you know the leftovers needs to be x plus 7, you just have to be careful that you didn't mess up the first group. But if we know the leftovers need to be x plus 7, just think what would have to be factored out of that group. Looking back, we would have to factor out a negative 8. Always check to make sure that that would be correct before moving on. Negative 8 times x is negative 8x, and negative 8 times 7 is negative 56. So that will work for our factoring. Write your answer in factored form. We have x plus 7 times x minus 8. Set each factor equal to 0 to solve. So we find our solutions as negative 7 and positive 8. You would subtract 7 from 0 to get negative 7 and add 8 to 0 to get 8. So our solutions in least to greatest order is negative 7 and positive 8.